Good afternoon. I am Rafael Ochoa, General Manager of Hillside Memorial Park and Mortuary. For over 35 years, Hillside Memorial Park has partnered with American Jewish University to enhance the Jewish community through educational programming that promotes the importance of constructive dialogue. Now, more than ever, it is imperative that we use our voice to stand up for what we believe in, to protect others, and to share our deepest support and thoughts with family and friends. This important time spent together seamlessly weaves together past, present, and future generations, ensuring our narratives resonate and inspire countless generations ahead. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our Temple Israel of Hollywood Senior Rabbi, Mari Cherno, to share a few words.
Thank you so much, Raf, and thank you to Hillside and to AJU for putting together this important series. We know in the Jewish tradition that words are important and words are powerful. We can elevate people with words, we can support people with words, we can harm people with words, we can even kill people with words. These end-of-life conversations are difficult to have, and we put them off and we resist them. But this series reminds us how important they are and how using our words with our closest, dearest loved ones will help us strengthen our family bonds, understand our own desires, and communicate them to those we love. Thank you for being here.
I could not have said it better. What a beautiful introduction to today's session on planning for peace of mind, feeling empowered with advanced directives. Welcome, I'm Rabbi Sherre Hirsch, and I am so delighted to be with you this morning, joining American Jewish University as a guest of Hillside Memorial Parks and Temple Israel of Hollywood. So you're looking at Rabbi Jason Weiner, who I think over the past 17 years has served as the spiritual director at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. It is extraordinary, because this is not the first time he's been with us, but what's extraordinary is that as a rabbi, he and I know that we have the great privilege of sitting with people as they take their final breaths. I can't think of a more gracious gift from God to be in that role. But at times, and I know Rabbi Weiner will address this today, that it can be very challenging. A family that's dealing with a terminal illness that suddenly has the death, has no directives, and has no idea the wishes of the deceased, and wants to act with the utmost of dignity and wants to give them their wishes, but there's never been a conversation. Do not let this be you. That is what today is all about. Do not make decisions in the midst of crisis. Do not make decisions in the midst of death and grieving. Make the decisions now when you're well. And if that's the only message you take, Rabbi Weiner will pound it in 100 times today. So first, I just want to say, Rabbi Weiner, it's such a pleasure to have you back. Not only have you been a published author of a second book while we were away, but so many numerous articles. You have so much respect. You have your doctorate in bioethics. I cannot think of a person more equipped to have this conversation than you. So welcome to Open Learning. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Rabbi Hirsch. It's an honor to be here with you. And you've really been a friend since I first began here 17 years ago, as you mentioned. So it's really quite a pleasure to be here with you.
It's scary that I remember your first day, which is even like, is that crazy? One of us is not old. And I think it's not you, because you look as young as the day we met.
I wasn't gray back then. I do remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember any gray, but I'm so privileged to have taken this journey with you. So let's get right into it, because at our first session, we talked about death over dinner, just having that conversation. But what we've heard from our listeners and our viewers is more than anything, they want to know how it goes down. Like, once you've had the conversation, okay, we're going to talk about death. We got over that hurdle. What do you do to prepare for advanced directives?
It's a great question. It's so important. You know, so many people are afraid to talk about it. I'm so happy to hear that people are asking about it. I'm having that experience as well, that people are, wanting to talk about it more. As scary as it is, it really gives meaning to life. The more we recognize the fragility of life, the more we appreciate, and it actually makes us live our lives better every day. We appreciate what we have, and it helps us take care of our family members. It reduces stress and anxiety. It helps the healthcare team to take care of us, and it helps us to make sure that we are cared for in the ways that we want to be cared for. And the best way to do that is to have something written down, something that's legally binding. In the hospitals, they're asking for this on a regular basis. If someone's in the hospital, they will be asked multiple times if they have an advance directive. People often say, yeah, I'll get to it, hopefully soon, let me see a copy, I'll work on it. The truth is the hospital's, as you mentioned, not the best time to start. It's much better to start before one is in the hospital, when one can actually sit down with a loved one and have a conversation. It's a gift for family members. So there are a number of forms. There's a lot of ways of doing an advance directive. I recently completed with an organization called Amitai, a new advance directive that's based on the Cedars-Sinai advance directive.
Before we even go there, I want to stop you because I know there's some barriers to doing advanced directives, and I want to hear all about what you're doing in response to those barriers. So let's take everybody through.
Sure.
So you've had the conversation, you get the advanced directives. Where do you get them?
Well, you can get them from multiple places. So most states, there are like official legal documents. Most hospitals will give you a document. But what people don't always realize is they don't have to use the one that they're given by their hospital. As long as they have a legally valid document, there's a lot of different, there's some called 5 Wishes. Hillside has a wonderful document. There's a lot of different avenues that one can receive within the Jewish community. There's about 5 or 6 different advance directives by various Jewish organizations. And one can look over the different options and see which one works better for them. They're all slightly different and have different pros and cons to each one.
Right. And when we discuss these pros and cons, I can tell you from a personal place, last year we had a medical issue in my husband, and what we had made all the advanced directives. But when we got there, what we didn't realize is we didn't know how we were going to feel in the moment. And I didn't trust them. Like he had said these things, but I was like, how do we feel or predict how we're going to feel at that exact moment? So you really identified that as a challenge for people. So talk to me about that.
Definitely. It's a huge challenge. I mean, I can remember a situation we had once where a woman came into our hospital. She had collapsed at home, and she had certain wishes described in her advance directive that she did not want to be on a respirator. But when the family showed up and found this out, they said, it's impossible. I think we even remembered her telling us that she was okay with that. So the doctor said, but look, we have in her chart this advance directive that she submitted that says that she doesn't want it. So they said, well, can we see it? So they showed it to the family. And it was this long document, like 20 pages, with dozens and dozens of different options, just yes or no. And she had just initialed down the whole thing. No, the whole thing. She clearly hadn't read it. And they were able to argue to the team, to the healthcare staff, like, can't you see from this document the way it's filled out? This was no thought was put into this. But they said, you could say that, but how do we know? I mean, this is a legally binding document. She submitted this. It was notarized. It has witnesses. Like, how can we know that for sure? Because one of the goals of a good advance directive is that it induces conversation. It's not just something that you sit at your desk or sit with your lawyer and just say yes, no, and just fill out. Rather, it's something that's meant to induce thoughts and conversations and not just one-word answers.
Right. It's meant to force you to say, like, where do I want to be buried? Who do I want to be in charge of my medical health care? It's like to really think about this stuff, right? And and the timeliness of it. So we started to talk about that people, you had this woman, the story makes me so sad. She just filled out the forms, right? Because we've got so much to do. I just filled out the forms. How did you start to think about advanced directives differently with your organization, with Amitai?
Well, this issue is one of the most common and most difficult issues we face in hospitals today, by far, because now that medical technology can do so much, it's really amazing. It's a huge blessing. It could save so many lives. At the same time, I can say the exact same thing. Now that medical technology can do so much, it's a huge curse. It can prolong so much suffering. I mean, it depends on how you look at it. And usually it's a blessing. I mean, it's great. We can prolong life and save life. But the challenge is that people's lives are being prolonged in situations where they can't speak for themselves, and we don't know what they would want. So we agonize about this in the hospital daily, literally daily, for patients for whom there's many options. And thank God, healthcare can provide many options today. But those options are based on our goals, values, and preferences. Everyone has their own idiosyncratic goals and values and preferences. How should I know when someone comes in the hospital what their goals and values are? Especially sometimes the family themselves can't even agree on what they think the patient would say if they could speak for themselves. So we recognize that the best way to solve this issue, I mean, there's no perfect solution until we could read someone's mind when they're not conscious, but the best thing possible is to have some kind of evidence of what their wishes are, what their goals are, while they are still healthy and of clear mind, and can have the opportunity to describe that to their family members, especially in a way that's clear and legally binding, not just like, oh, I think they mentioned to me once when we were at a Dodger game, they said it in passing, but something that was more focused, asks good questions. And sometimes we had challenges with some advanced directives that, let's say someone comes in with an advanced directive, and we've had this many times, that was published in the 1980s. And
a little outdated.
Yeah, a little. And the medical technology itself isn't even the same. It's changing so rapidly. So it's like they come in here, they wrote something in the 80s when they couldn't even imagine what they would be hospitalized for. And they're talking about interventions that we don't even use in the same ways anymore, or they clearly misunderstand the way they're referring to it. And how are we supposed to know if this can really apply? So sometimes not only do we have the challenge of trying to figure out what a patient would want when we don't know what they want, sometimes we have the challenge of figuring out what they would want when they told us what they want, but it's not clear from that document exactly what they meant.
It's so crazy because you're starting to think about what are the values that this person possesses? What is their mindset, right? Would this person want to be put on a respirator? Are they a person that values living over every medical intervention, right? And you're starting to say, if we can look at the values, and even if the document is outdated, which I will say, Israel's recommendation is you update the document every 5 years.
Exactly.
5 years. That's like not even 7 years. Like 5 years is nothing. Like you've got to be renewing this document, but you're starting to say, what are those values? And what's an example of a value that transcends a directive specifically?
Yeah, there could be a lot. It's not just respirators. That's one major one. But I'll give you an example. Recently, I went to visit a patient who on the door of the patient's room, there was a sign that said, do in massive letters, do not disclose her diagnosis. She doesn't know. The family didn't want her to know how bad her diagnosis was. So I went in, I'm sitting with her privately, just visiting this patient. And she says to me at one point, Rabbi, don't tell my family about my diagnosis because I don't think they can handle it. I don't want them to know. So she thinks they don't know. They think she doesn't know. Meanwhile, they're all lying to each other. And a great question to ask in an advanced directive is, how much would you want to know if you have a severe illness? Would you want to know? Because people start guessing, I don't think she would want to know, so I'm not going to tell her. Meanwhile, she's saying, I need to know because I don't want them poking and prodding me if I don't know why they're doing it. Otherwise, I'm going to assume the worst. So people have opinions about this type of stuff, but it's very hard to broach that topic. You can't say to someone after they wake up from surgery, if I would have some information about you that I just found out, theoretically, hypothetically, would you want me to tell you? And they're like, okay, what do you know? It's like, it's too late then.
Right. It's way too late. And having these conversations now. So I want to begin with, you just said you could go get these advanced directives from all different places. Something that I didn't know, and I'm a rabbi, is that, for example, at Hillside, and I think many different places, but at Hillside, they have counselors, right? It happens at Hillside. They're not on commission. I love that because they're literally service oriented, but they have counselors, coaches to actually help you through this process. And this is not a pitch for Hillside, but this is a pitch for you don't have to do this alone. So when you go to your counselor, and I know they're available all the time, you don't have to be like, I'm buying a plot. You can just go and say, what do I need to do to prepare my advanced directives? What do you start by saying?
What do you start by saying when you're looking for an advanced directive? Or
what do you say? What do you say to the counselor? I need some help with this. I mean, people don't even know how to start that conversation. Like, hi, I'm not going to die anytime soon, but just in case, like, what does that look like?
I mean, there are a number of different documents and conversations that are essential to have, so, and these places will have those on file, and they can help a person walk through whether these are financial wills or whether they are ethical wills. We have another concept, we sometimes call it a legacy letter, which is becoming popular again, where it's not about healthcare preferences, but more about defining and articulating one's legacy, which is a beautiful, beautiful opportunity. And then there's advanced directives for healthcare, which is another very specific.
So we left over something that I want to go back to, which is you pick your advanced directives, right? We're now trying to do it value-based. And then you have to pick a person who's going to be the power of attorney.
Yeah.
How do you pick that person? Because I can tell you with my own experiences as a rabbi that I literally sat in front of a family. One person had power of attorney, and every other member of the family had a different plan of how this person was to be buried.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, first of all, those challenges are mitigated by having an advanced directive, because the goal of the proxy, of the power of attorney, the agent, there's different phrases for it, different words. Their job is to represent the patient. Their job is not to say, here's what I prefer for them. Here's what I think is in their best interest. Their job legally and also in Jewish values is to best represent what would the patient say if they could speak right now. So the person who should be chosen to be one's agent on their advanced directive should be that person who one feels will best represent what my own goals, values, and preferences are. Oftentimes it's a spouse or a child, someone who's easily reachable, because that's crucial, someone who you feel that knows you well, can represent those values, who you feel is responsible, who you feel that they are comfortable with having these conversations in difficult moments. Some people feel like they don't want to be the one given that responsibility. It's a lot of pressure, it can be. It's important to tell, oftentimes these forums have alternates. So if someone's not available, someone else can be in that role.
But really, you need two people.
Ideally, at least two.
When you don't want a family member and you want to pick someone else, how do you navigate that conversation?
Oftentimes, I try to help people, to encourage them to tell their families that, this is not about choosing favorites. It's not about saying that I love this one more than that one. In fact, oftentimes people will choose different agents for different documents based on their closest with that person, or the way that they, in that area of their life. So some people I don't want to talk about my money with, but I'm comfortable with other people talking about that with. So, it's really, sometimes I even tell people in the hospital, I say, have them blame me. Tell your family that I said, you need to choose, this is the one you should choose just for this, but you have backup, and you can even put in the document, make this decision collaboratively. They forced me to choose one because legally that's what we require, to have one to mitigate some of the conflict. But we ask that the decisions all be made communally as a family. Please discuss it, and try to give as much color as possible as to your own goals and values, so that they don't have to struggle to interpret it. Rather, they can simply say, even if someone says, I wouldn't choose this for you if it was up to me, but this is your choice. You put in the advanced directive, therefore I'm honoring your wishes.
And sometimes the people closest to us in crisis are not the best at making those decisions and keeping that distance. Sometimes it's someone who's once or twice removed who can really say,
Definitely.
I can represent the document. And one thing that I also recently learned was that medical power of attorney, and I know there's a lot of names for it as you referenced, but they're also in charge of your funeral and burial decisions. So you may have made all the decisions for your medical care and skipped over the funeral and burial decisions, and yet that power of attorney still has that responsibility. So how do you prevent that from going awry?
Yeah, thinking about these things, people think they're only thinking about, like, as we mentioned before, respirators and medical technology, but it's really about the main line that I always say that people should complete the sentence. What matters to me at the end of life is, and just free flow from there. That relates to all sorts of things. It could be, who do you want to speak at your funeral? For me, and I'm sure you've had this experience, Rabbi Hirsch, I know you guide a lot of families through the end of life and through their funerals. Some of the most meaningful funerals are those which the deceased themselves planned many aspects of the funeral, whether it's who's going to speak or music that's going to be played. And it has a whole nother feel to it. I remember when I first started here, after I met you, being one of the first people, someone took me out to lunch, and he was telling me about how, like, he builds relationships through lunches. So finally I said, okay, so thanks for, the lunches there, like, I hope to be good friends. He said, well, I'll be honest with you. One day, I'm hoping that you'll conduct my funeral, because if you're the rabbi here and this is my community, you'll perform my funeral. So I want you to know me. And every number of months, he would proactively reach out to me to take me out to lunch. And 8 years after that first lunch, sadly, he passed away. And for me, it was one of the most meaningful funerals. I mean, I actually cried. And I never, while giving the eulogy, I cried because I had such high regard for him. And it was such a personalized funeral. Everyone left there saying, like, wow, this was such an honor for this man we didn't even realize how special, how incredible he was. And I thought to myself, it's because he planned ahead. It's because he thought, everyone's going to have a funeral one day. And he thought about how it will look and who should speak and what they should say. And it was just very meaningful. It's just such a special thing.
That story brings me to tears, because I too have had that where people have said, I want you to officiate my funeral when I die. May it be when I'm 120. And I've said, let's go to lunch. And they're like, I don't want to hasten death. I don't want to. And so I think a lot of people struggle, Rabbi Weiner, with this idea that if you're talking about it in detail, it's going to be a marit ayin. It's going to bring the evil eye.
Right.
So how do you change that mindset?
Yeah. The good thing is there's a lot of Jewish sources about this exact topic. You're right. It's a common thing that people are concerned about. Ayin hara, the evil eye, as you said, and all these concerns that people don't want to test their fate. The truth is, there's an ancient rabbinic saying that says that when a person purchases their burial plot while they are young and healthy, it's what they say in Hebrew, a sagula farichat yamim. It's a charm for long life, which sounds funny. It's a charm for long life to buy your burial plot, but that phrase arichat yamim. There's a story about the Sfas Emes, a great Hasidic rabbi. He died in his 50s. The story goes that at the Shiva, someone came to visit his sons during Shiva. So someone says to his son, well, at least, actually, I should pause there and say, one of the phrases never to start a sentence with at a Shiva or Bikur Cholim in the hospital is, right, well, at least.
Right.
Okay, the story goes, someone said, well, at least he had a Richad Yamim. At least he had a long life. So the son responds, what are you talking about? He died in his 50s. We wanted him for much longer than that. That's not a long life. So this visitor said to him, no. I didn't say he had a Richat Shanim. He had many years. I said he had a Richat Yamim. He had long days, meaning he made the most of every day. He accomplished so much. He left such a legacy. So there is something to be said for when we think about the end, when we purchase our burial plot, it reminds us that we only have a set amount of time left. The Talmud actually says that people used to die when they sneezed. That's why we have bless you. We say bless. People used to die when they sneeze. That's why they say, how's it go? Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posy. It used to go, achoo, achoo. We all fall down, and then people would die. That was how the song used to go. We changed it to ashes, ashes. But so, anyways, there used to be an ancient thing that people died when they sneezed. The Talmud says that Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, wanted to leave a legacy, so he prayed to God for illness. Sounds crazy, but he prayed to God for illness so that he would have an opportunity to know before he was going to die that he would have some time first to have a warning that he's going to be sick, and then he can leave his legacy to his family. And the Torah actually says he called on each of his children and gave them a blessing, told them about his hopes and dreams for them. And so there's actually a positive value to planning for the end, and you see it in many, many sources. And so even though people, yes, they are concerned, it's going to be an evil eye, it's a bad luck charm, but the truth is, if you actually look in our Jewish sources, our rabbis have been encouraging us for generations to have these conversations, and they argue that actually it will enhance our lives, not shorten them.
If that's the only thing you take away today as a viewer, that the rabbis were telling us to have these conversations, and if we get the blessing of being ill before we die so that we're able to speak and share and communicate, that we can be like Yaakov, right? And give each of our children a blessing. I know when my mother died at a very young age, as she was getting sicker and sicker, she said to me, I'm so grateful for my sickness. And I said to her, Mom, what are you talking about? She said, had I died in a moment, I would have never had these moments with you to say every last word. And as hard as it was, being able to talk about in health what happens in death enables you to live better each day, is what you're saying. It's so beautiful. And that's B'charta b'chaim. That's what we're supposed to do every day.
Definitely.
Choose life, right? Live well. So as we spoke about, the state of Israel requires that you do this, or encourages you to do this every 5 years.
Right.
My husband, as I mentioned, was ill last year. We hadn't done it in 12. And we're rabbi. Like, I'm a rabbi. He's not a rabbi, but he's a doctor. I mean, we should know better. So do you put a timer on your phone? How do you sort of remind yourself, like at your birthday, at Yom Kippur, it's like, oh, it's September, it's the high holidays. Now's my renewal time. What do you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, Yom Kippur is a time to talk about it as one example. And the Parsha of Vayechi, there's kind of been a movement happening a little bit. That's the Parsha of when Yaakov blesses his children with his legacy. There's a kind of a movement starting of encouraging rabbis to talk about these issues. You're right, there should be some kind of a timer. I mean, it's not so easy to have a 5-year timer. But if it's not exactly 5 years, the point is it should be fairly frequent that a person is reviewing these, especially if there's any change in their health status or major life changes. People are encouraged to, take a look at it and redo it. And just the point is, when they first do it, to know that I'm not done. It's not like, okay, I did it, I'm done, never look at that again. It's just, they should know from the start, as we're discussing right now, that it's an issue to be checked up on.
Well, that's what I love about it. It's like we spend so much time picking a school for our child, picking a car, researching what computer, what phone we're going to buy. This is something that requires real research and real continual evaluation. And one of the things that I've learned, which I think nobody knows, is you can go to Hillside or to any other funeral home and take a tour. You can go online and get a 360, but you can actually call up and say, I want a tour. And I never knew that. And when my parents died very young, I went and said, I got to see what's going to happen here. And when I did my advanced directives, I did another tour. I mean, if we're taking that much time to make a decision about a car, my God, we should do the research here, right? So I tell people, go look and see what you're buying and what's the difference between you're buying the burial right. You're not buying the physical real estate, right? So that means you can move it around, which I never know. I thought once you bought the plot, you had to stick with the plot. And that's actually not true. And in fact, my parents were divorced and I didn't want them so close together. And the day of, I had to move the plot, which is a story in itself. So Rabbi Weiner, there's so many good questions coming in, and I want to take them one at a time and let you have ample time to answer. First of all, I just want to say that David, thank you. He said that Harvard Medical School offers extremely detailed advanced medical directives. Hillside, Cedars, UCLA, you name it. So thank you for that. But he does ask, are there any forms that you recommend personally?
Yeah, great question. So at Cedars-Sinai, a few years ago, we created a new kind of improved advanced directive, trying to overcome some of the barriers, some of the challenges that people have, whether it's too complicated, too burdensome. And at that time, we created also a Jewish advanced directive. Since then, I mentioned before the organization Amitai, we created like a new and improved version even of that, which is called Netivot. Amitai is the organization, and within Amitai,
is there a website that you can go to?
Yeah, we'll put it in the chat.
Okay, great.
Netivot and it's a legally binding document in all states and Canada. There's different options there for which form. And the goal of that was to not just have people explain their specific interventions that they want or don't want, but to help be a conversation guide. So it's actually a 2-part advanced directive. One part's very simple. They just appoint their agent. They have a rabbi for consultation. If someone wants a rabbi to be consulted, then option for organ donation after they die. And that's the advanced directive. Then there's a conversation guide that goes along with it, where we ask some very carefully crafted questions that helps a person to articulate what is most meaningful to them through major illness, advanced illness, the dying process, hopefully sometimes the recovery process, but different issues that we found to be the most common questions that people have different values regarding. And it gives the person a chance to describe their values, but also to have meaningful conversations. That the conversation guide, honestly, I use it with patients all the time. People call me. One of the common questions I get is, Rabbi, we just got, someone in our family just got a terminal diagnosis. What should we be talking about? Like, what are the conversations that should be happening in our family? And so even before sometimes we do the advanced directive, I just go over the conversation guide with them. I say, here's some things that we should talk about. Maybe it's too hard all at once. So we just talk about a few little by little. And I find it to be very meaningful, and it really induced very powerful conversations.
Beautiful. And I always say you should have 3 rabbis on your speed dial or in your favorites on your phone. They don't have to be your best friends, but they always should be there just in case. That means maybe your congregational rabbi, your Cedars-Sinai rabbi, maybe the rabbi that works at Hillside. You should always have a rabbi that you can go to.
Yeah.
So this is from Bob Olesh. Can a close family member veto a written advanced directive by being very verbal at the hospital bedside?
Look, the advanced directive's job, as I mentioned before, is to follow the preferences of the patient themselves. That's what we follow. That's there's in American law and in bioethics, there's something called the best interest standard, which is where someone says, I know it's better for them. But then there's something called substituted judgment, which is what we follow, which is our job is to be the judgment of what the patient would want if they were here right now. Of course, there are times when the family puts up a major protest and a major fight. And sometimes, if they're all united in that fight and they make sense, sometimes we might listen to what they're saying and adjust the plan based on that. But the real imperative is to honor the patient's wishes as they described. Sometimes, I'll give you an example where it could be conflict. Sometimes, let's say someone has on their driver's license that they want to be an organ donor, but they said to someone in their family, let's say something that seems to contradict that. So the license, we follow the license, even against the family, sometimes even against parents of a patient, because that's the law. But sometimes the family puts up a fight, and we have to take that into account. But legally, we go by the advanced directive. We go by what the patient's wishes are.
Beautiful. And there's a lot of questions around the details of picking your advanced directive person. First of all, should they be younger?
Well, there is a value in having them younger. I get that because they'll be alive longer. I see if that's what.
What about living geographically close or in the same time zone?
There's value to that, but nowadays we have people in meetings with the doctors all the times on FaceTime and on iPads. So the truth is that as long as it's a person who will represent your values, who's reachable, who's comfortable having these conversations, and given the fact that we're encouraging people to update these documents and have a backup, I don't think they have to worry so much about it being someone who's younger or closer, because if they can't reach the person or the person's not available, so they have backups and they have this document, and the document, sometimes we can't even find the proxy, but we have the document. And if it's a good one, it's a well filled out advanced directive, which also in addition to the questions we ask, I know in our Nativot advanced directive, and many have this, there's also space for free flowing, just writing, just please describe for us, help us know who you are, what matters to you, around all these various issues that could come up. And then we'll interpret it to the best of our ability to honor that patient's wishes.
What if you have no family and you can't think about a particular friend? Are there organizations? Are there other entities that you can appoint for your power of attorney?
Well, you could appoint. So one of the ways, for example, when we wrote in the Nativot advanced directive to consult a rabbi for the backup, I mean, you mentioned this a moment ago, that's important to have backups. For the backup, we also wrote to include an institution. Meaning, let's say you outlive your rabbi or your rabbi is retired, but is there an organization where you say, whoever's the rabbi of this synagogue, that's my rabbi, and I want them to be consulted. The thing is, it's important for them to know something about you. But yeah, many patients don't have family or people who can serve as their agent, but they still have organizations. This Amitai does that. There's a lot of organizations.
And I know congregants who have no family have come to me and said, Rabbi, would you be my power of attorney? Just because they trust me and they know me. And so it really isn't about finding the perfect family member or the perfect friend. It's about finding the person can execute on your wishes, which is so clear from what you're saying. So we talked about advanced directives for healthcare. What other advanced directives are there?
Yeah, well, so one of them is the living will that I mentioned. Living will is a great document. I'll tell you a story that I remember once we had a young patient who had just had a baby. She had a horrible cancer, and she was very depressed, as you can imagine. And the staff tried everything to get her out of her depression. They gave her depression medications, and nothing was working. So finally, thankfully, they asked for a chaplain to see her. And as chaplains, our job is to listen, just to be good listeners, help people express themselves. And in talking to her, she said that the only thing on her mind is the fact that her young daughter will not know her mother, this patient. And as we talked to her, we said, well, are there things we could do about that? What if we make some videos where you talk to her? What if we write a document, a living will, where you describe, and we actually do like workshops on living to help people write their living will, where you describe your own legacy, what matters to you, what you've learned in your life, what's important to you. And we did that with her, and she became a different person. It was amazing. She started eating again, participating in her care, sleeping. Unfortunately, she didn't live much longer after that, but it was an incredible gift. To those last few months of her life were spent creating a legacy for her daughter and her family. And it's a very special opportunity. It's another thing. It's separate from the advanced directive because it's not about healthcare decisions. It's about what matters to you. What have you learned? I'm happy to help guide people through how we do this, but we do workshops all the time.
That story is so powerful for so many reasons. And I know also Stephen Leader just wrote a book on ethical wills. We had him on Maven, which used to be open learning. And he really spoke. There's 10 questions, 10 chapters. It's easy, right?
Yeah.
You pick a chapter a week and you go through it. And I'm so moved by that story. I feel like, Rabbi Weiner, we could just sit and listen to stories all day long about how you've navigated this for people, because as much as we talk about it, and I know you and I talk about it so much, I still am faced with almost every funeral where people are like, what is a pallbearer, or how do I select them? Because we watch the funeral, but we don't really participate in it, right? It's like when you're driving, when you're in the passenger seat, you never know how to get there. And the first time you're in the driver's seat, you're like, I'll never forget how to get to this place. So is there a forum, I believe at Hillside, where on the website can you go about burial instructions, who should speak, music, flowers, the eulogy? Like, is there a thing you can just fill out?
Yeah, it's a great idea. We have in our Nativot Advanced Directive, there is a section. It doesn't have every option like choose, but it does ask people to think about their funeral wishes and to describe them, write them out. Hopefully, the rabbi or some family members can do some of the planning, but if someone has specific wishes about their funeral, sometimes it could be who they don't want to be there, but that comes up, or who they want to speak, or things that they want to be displayed, certain pictures or things like that. I frequently encounter music that they want to be played there. We have space on that in the last page of our advanced directive, and many do. I know many include a question.
Yeah, I know, and Hillside has them on their advanced directives. Yeah. Also, question. You have your advanced directives, you've filled them out. What do you keep? A copy in your safe, a copy to your lawyer, a copy to your rabbi? Like, where do you put them? Someone asked a great question. It's like, do I give them to my doctor?
Right. Yes. Good question. You know that there's a custom. It's so interesting. Some people put them in their freezer. I know it sounds weird, but that's like a thing. But first of all, they should be given to anyone who's listed as a proxy. They should have a copy, and the healthcare provider and the institution where they receive their healthcare. So, for example, at Cedars-Sinai, when people send them to me and their patients here, we have them uploaded to their chart. And that way, anytime they're in any institution, in any way affiliated with Cedars-Sinai, in their chart, their doctor or any healthcare professional can go in their chart. There's a place where they click, and it's downloaded to their chart. So that's a very simple way. If wherever they receive healthcare nowadays has a place in their chart for that, and their doctor usually can upload it there. But if they have a place where they keep all their important documents, like with their lawyer or in a safe, like you mentioned, it should be there, as well as anyone who's listed in the document to be consulted with.
And a lot of people are asking, you mentioned that you do these workshops to walk through it. How do you find out more about these workshops that you do?
That's a good question. I should do it more organized. I just do it when people ask me to do it. Basically, I don't have it's not like a once a month thing.
So maybe we can get AJU to find out from you and send it out to the mailing list of everybody who attended today. Yeah. So if you're interested, someone wrote, put it in a knock box. I don't even know what that is. A knock box. Rabbi Gerber, I have no idea what that is. Do you know what an NOK box is?
I don't.
No, I don't either. So we'll have to find out that. Oh, next of kin box. Oh, thank you, Rabbi Gerber. We've got a lot of rabbis on the line. Now, I want to say that Hillside Memorial Park is here for so many of you. It does not matter your religious denomination. This is not about, you're not going to be checked at the door if you've gone to synagogue 15 times or 10 times. Every single person is welcome to have this conversation with these expert trained people. And so the other thing that I would just say is there's a few takeaways from today that I want to emphasize, and I want you to make sure that you also make sure I don't forget any. First is, it's not too early, right? It's like suddenly you wake up and you're 55 and you can't believe so much time has passed. But you and I both see that horrible tragedies happen in a moment. I mean, all the time, and that it's never too early to begin this work. So that's the first takeaway.
Yeah, if I could interrupt you real quick.
Please.
Some recommend even at the age of 16 to have an advanced directive. Once people are driving, there's a certain level of risk that's already an appropriate age to have an advanced directive.
God, that's so true, because how many kids I've dealt with kids who've had car accidents and have died. So that's so beautiful.
So you're right. It's never too early. Sorry to interrupt.
Second is reach out to get help. Call Hillside Memorial Park, speak to a representative, call Rabbi Weiner, call me. Make sure you have a support system of people that can guide you in this process. They don't have to be your friends, but people that have expertise. I always say, surround yourself with people better than you and let them do what they're supposed to do. Third, take a tour, like a college tour. I'm in the college phase, Rabbi Weiner, you're not there yet, but take a tour, go to these memorial grounds, have a conversation, see where your loved one will be buried, see where you want to be buried, right? Take a Sunday afternoon, make an appointment and go. Really what I'm saying and what I hear you saying and what the Jewish tradition more so is saying is that we have to be prepared, right? We have to be prepared, and we have the faculties at our disposal. So I want to give you a chance for final words.
Well, the final thing I would say, for me, the opportunity to work in a hospital and to work with patients, I also kind of avoided these topics, and I also never wanted to face them. But I can't tell you how many times, I leave the hospital at the end of the day and I think to myself, I need to prioritize my value. I need to think clearly about how I'm spending my time and what I'm doing, because our time is limited, and we want to make the most of our time here. I wasn't sure if I was going to share this, but a year ago, I donated a kidney. And the most meaningful part of that actual experience was I met with the nephrologist beforehand, and she asked me how old I am. So I told her I'm 45. So she says, okay, perfect age, because your other kidney could for sure last 40 years on your own. So that will last you the rest of your life. So I was like, what do you mean? That's like, what if I do the math? That's only 85. I'm planning to live much longer than that. And I was sort of joking, but she got really serious, and she said, you need to be realistic. Like, most people live into their 80s, and that's a good life. And I hope you live much longer too. But you should think about your life as though that's how much time you have. Like, don't think you're living to 150, because the odds will be against you in that case. And I remember, I walked out of her office, dizzy almost. And right away I was like, okay, I need to call my daughter. She's going through something. I need to, I forgot about all these other things in life that kind of blind us from what really matters. And I thought to myself, and since then, honestly, I walked out of her office. It's 15 months ago now. I haven't stopped thinking about it. I can't stop thinking about it. Not in a depressed way. I'm not depressed about it. I'm just I have on my computer right now that I'm looking at, as I'm looking at you, I have the Hebrew letters. It says, Shema lo tipaneh. That's from the second chapter of Pirkei Avot. It says, Al tomar kashe'efne epne. Don't say, when I have time, then I'll do it. Shem lo tipaneh, because maybe you won't have time. Do it now. And so I literally printed it out and put it on my computer right in front of where I sit every day to remind myself, maybe you won't have time, get it done now. Do what you need to do. Say what you need to say. Tell that person you love them. Fix that relationship. Do that thing you've always wanted to do. You know, we never know how much time we have. Life is fragile, and I hope everyone on this call, my blessing for all of you, you should have long, healthy lives. As we said before, richat yamim and richat shanim, long days and long lives. I hope people have long, blessed lives that are very meaningful and happy. And I think that to contribute to it being meaningful and happy, it's important to recognize that life is fragile and our days are limited, and we have to make the most of it. And then it can actually be happy. It's not a depressing sentiment. It should be something that's uplifting.
Literally, there's nothing to say after that, Rabbi Weiner. That was the most stunning. You're such a good rabbi. Like, you're one of my rabbis. You're on my speed dial. Just want to say, there's nothing to say. Just heed his words. Please, please. Let every day count. Be well, stay well. We're so glad you were here with us today.
On behalf of myself, the entire Hillside Memorial Park and Mortuary staff, the Temple Israel of Hollywood community, including the Hillside Council of Directors, we are proud to collaborate with AJU to present today's program, with gratitude to Rabbi Sherre Hirsch and Michael Hebb for this presentation on the importance of end-of-life conversations. May you and each generation to follow share in the love of family and tradition.